when I was like 3 or 4. That was the first time I watched two people have sex right in front of me. And this was 30 years ago. But I can still remember how I felt quite vividly. Mentally, I can still see him walking her downstairs into that basement right before he went over to that sink in the washroom, took off his clothes, and then started to pee. Pee. I guess that was the start of pornography for me. Because unfortunately, I followed behind him, and I remember looking at him with a little boy's curiosity. Can't quite remember what I was feeling exactly emotionally, but I can remember cognitively examining him, comparing him to myself, because that was the very first time I had ever consciously, actually thought through the reality that there was another human being who had the same body part as me. And so before I even go any deeper, please excuse me if this comes off too raunchy, but I'm just trying to paint this picture, tell my story with the deepest of honesty. Foolishly, maybe it's still just a little boy in me who even feels the need to tell this story. But I'm telling you right now that this poetry is not rated PG, because growing up, my life was never peachy. So if you're not mature enough for the vulgarity and my vulnerability, all I can do is just ask you to please close your eyes if you don't want to see. Because this is what real looks like. I was just a tyke. Some would say that he was just a baby. I shouldn't have even been exposed to this type of debauchery. But the sad thing is that even though we try to shield our kids from things like this, somehow it still managed to happen to me. The devil must have been watching me. And I can't just keep trying to sweep all of this trauma under the rug, because even before I was old enough to articulate myself accurately, he was already after me. He's been attacking God's children before we even old enough to know who we are supposed to be. And we can't keep sweeping this under the rug, because the devil is sweeping through this nation, trying to destroy this next generation coming up behind me. He trying to do a sweep. And so back to the story, there goes me watching them go boom, while I'm innocently playing with that broom. I don't understand why this grown man just couldn't take me upstairs to my room and put me to sleep. It's like he pervertedly enjoyed me watching them. It's like he wanted me to see. How sick does your mind really have to be for two adults to unclothe themselves and begin to perform these kinds of acts right in front of me? She says I feel uncomfortable. She's intimidated at how I'm focusing on her so attentively and so intensively. He's behind her. He tells her to turn over, but she fronting. She like, I can't because that little boy over there watching me. His eyes are all over me, and he just keeps standing there staring while you on top of me. Well, I'm sorry, ma'am. Excuse me. But let's please remember that you in my house, in my basement, doing this strange thing that I've never seen, and I'm only like 3. You the one invading my privacy. Sister, please tell me, where is your sense of dignity? Why are you two exposing me to this type of indecency? And just to think, he was supposed to be a friend of the family. Some friend. Because my mama left me with my uncle, and then he hit the streets. After having one too many drinks, he left me with his friend. And so this man was supposed to be watching me. But somehow, I end up watching him. And for some reason, I never even told my mom this story until I was well into my 20s. I guess I thought it just wasn't a big deal, honestly. Maybe I just told myself it didn't really happen. It was just some sadistic, twisted, boyish fantasy. Why would someone want to have someone else watch them interacting sexually? Why would two grown people actually want to just purposely steal my innocence from me? It wasn't real. I'm just imagining. I gotta be. Little kids have big imaginations, right? So maybe it's just another part of a little boy growing up. Maybe I'm just crazy, like they always tell us when something happens to us tragically. It's like we don't want to admit these kinds of tragedies. We want to believe that all of this somehow just fades away magically. Because little kids believe in magic, right? So now I'm 8 years old, touching and humping on my little cousins who were close in age to me. Cause I didn't understand all of the trauma I was covering up inside of me. I guess all of this perversion is just happening out of body. Poof! The devil taking the mind of another youth. I guess somehow he just put all of these nasty thoughts inside of my head, magically. So how sick is this? In my 20s, still struggling with guilt for this. I feel like I must have knew what I was doing, because how come I can still remember it? It wasn't until I started opening up and privately telling other young men my story that I began to realize that it was a lot of us who had a childhood just like me. And to think, I thought it was only me. The idea of believing that I had the intellectual capacity to understand my own actions is nothing but a lie told to me by the enemy to make me feel like I needed to keep this in secrecy, but that's a fallacy, a cold and harsh reality. How is a little kid supposed to understand his own trauma, afflicted with a sickness, and I wasn't even old enough to grasp the concept of what I was actually struggling with? The devil already tempted me, watching me. He like, open your eyes and watch this. This is something other adults don't want you to see. But Chris, open your eyes. I want you to be able to see, just like I did Adam and Eve. He wanted to isolate me because he knows that in isolation, he can keep us closed down, closed in, and chained up in the darkness where we can never get free. I didn't want to tell nobody back when I was watching pornography because I was spiritually immature. God says be wise as a serpent, but he was smarter than me. Around 11 or 12, stumbled upon my uncle's little private videotape, and it brought me back to those same memories from when I was 3. I remember when I popped it in for the first time, my imagination went wild, like wow. Taking a trip back down memory lane, but this time only watching it on TV wasn't quite gonna be enough for me. Because now I want more. I don't just want to see. Forget watching pornography. I really want to know what it feels like to be behind the scenes. Because growing up with sex all around me, I seen adults watching porn together, laughing and talking like it was just another funny movie scene. But nobody talking to me about my first wet dream. I remember I woke up embarrassed to ask my mom what's wrong with me because I'm ashamed of myself thinking that I had peed. And that's why I made sure to have that intentional conversation with my little nephew in the car, because I didn't want him to grow up and have the same experiences as me. I'm watching him, and I pray over him almost every day because he reminds me so much of me. From the way that he holds so tight to his grandmother, to the way that when he was little, he used to respond to everything so emotionally. But it's almost time for him to become a man now, and I can still remember what it felt like when I was a teen. But fast forward to me at 24. This is where the story really gets deep. I had just gotten married, never considered myself to be addicted to pornography because I had become far more interested in doing the real thing. Before that, struggling with treating women like inanimate, expendable objects of my affection. But now I was ready to change my direction. I thought that being married meant that unlimited sex came with the ring. But then we started having problems and fighting within the first 2 years. Our relationship felt more like a ring because selfishly, instead of trying to understand her emotions, I was just desperately trying to understand and find me. Girl, I need you to fulfill me. You feel me? Come and let me feel you. My heart is lonely and you complete me. I had my mind on all of the wrong things. Not truly understanding the value of or God's intentions for marriage. Wife suggested counseling before we even got married. But like I said, my mind was already on other things. Just couldn't wait to get to that honeymoon so that we could make love in the sun, sin free. Instead of focusing on how marriage is vowing to reflect God's glory together and the coming together of two human beings, I'm more worried about coming together. Lust got a strong hold on me. Forget a matrimony, girl, I'm horny. Before we even got married, I pulled her into doing some of the wrong things. Tries to justify it like God knows that we have physical needs. He know we got these strong desires because he's the one who made human beings. But it was my fault. It was me. Even when I wanted to stop, we were already in too deep. Or maybe I could just blame it on the devil or those two people who showed me something I was never even supposed to see. He was watching me and he had me watching them. Those three are the ones who corrupted me. But the problem is, I should have been focusing on the other three who promised me that he could save me from me. I can't go around blaming nobody else. Nah, I'm a man now, and I don't care what happened to me. I'm still the only one responsible for me. And we've all seen things that we could never unsee. Watching each other from the distance like, I'm just glad that ain't me. But we all got sin in our life. And we all got to accept full accountability for all of our own chosen activities because God gave us the liberty to live free. But the sad truth is that a lot of us just don't want to be. As a matter of fact, some of y'all gonna be listening to this, watching me. And instead of getting the point, understanding who I'm trying to point you to, you gonna laugh and point at me. Because we want to be just like this world. We rather like what we see. We talk about loving this life, and so we don't want to despise our ways enough to change. I got to a place where I desperately hated myself, my actions so much that I broke down and passionately started asking Jesus to change me. And so just to tread back for a second, this all started back when I had given my life to God at 19. I was supposed to already be a Christian, but the sad reality is that most of us who call ourselves Christians don't even truly understand what living for Christ really means. I would be out playing basketball with the homies, guys watching pornography, showing each other in the gym, talking about the girls in the video like, why she living like that? I would wife her. She shouldn't be doing this. She should be over here with me. Watching and laughing while someone is degrading themselves. And it's not funny because even though I'm at home secretly fighting with the same things, now I'm starting to get to a place where it's affecting me. And just like that girl I was watching way back when I was 3, now I'm the one feeling uncomfortably. At home just trying to get closer to my wife, just trying to do the right thing, but the devil's still haunting and hunting me. God watching me. And I'm failing miserably. I don't want to die to myself. I just wanted to be myself. Every now and then behind closed doors, living in hypocrisy, double life. Because even though I'm still young and I ain't going around talking to nobody about God yet, now I understand why I couldn't do it boldly, living another life secretly. The devil shut me up because I was still struggling with pornography. Double life, double-minded, lacking in emotional and mental stability, no integrity. The devil got his hands on me, shut me up and shut me in behind closed doors because I couldn't say anything to nobody, knowing good and well I was guilty. The homies didn't care, they just watched it religiously. But deep down in my soul, the Holy Spirit was starting to point out my sin and promise me that if I trusted in Him, He could set me free. I was dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety, struggling financially, trying to understand what it meant to be a real man, going to college at Wayne State University, living in that little one-room apartment on Alexandrian Street, just working at Myers Grocery, trying to finish school and make ends meet. And what I also forgot to say previously is that 2 months after I gave my life to Jesus, I also met my wife at 19. And I still remember promising God that I was going to stop messing around with all these other girls altogether. Just merely being close friends with her was a lot better. It was real intimacy. And I wasn't even looking for a wife at the time. I was just trying to get closer to Him and get myself clean. But now that I look back over all of those years, God always knew that she was the type of woman that I would need. He began using her to teach me. She is like my mirror, a reflection for me. And so sometimes being with her, it's like watching the parts of me that I don't even want to see. Because sadly, this isn't the way that I wanted this part of the story to play out for me. It wasn't thrilling at all. I mean, it literally got hard for me. My wife was never just a cheap thrill for me. I wasn't trying to go deep. I was trying to go deeper. I wanted me and her to grow closer. I was trying to use her to complete me and fulfill me in ways that God can only be. A lot of holes in me. I didn't fall in love with watching her or making love to her, but spending time together talking about our dreams back in our teens. Back then, I was too busy trying to get to know her rather than spending enough time reflecting on what was wrong with me. And so now we're a couple years into our marriage. I'm like 26, and all of these emotional abandonment issues, feeling all alone, and I can't tell the whole story, but I grew up feeling like my parents didn't want me. So now I'm pressuring her, always pulling at her. I need her to want me. Girl, I need you to feed my ego. Are you watching me? Idolizing our intimacy over being closer to the God who made me. He was watching me, and he told me that he was going to tear up our foundation and begin to rebuild me because he was filled with a godly jealousy. Anybody who's ever watched me knows how much I love my wife. And God said that she would always be your first responsibility, but she still don't come before me. She is absolutely my first priority. But God still said, don't you ever prioritize human love over me. But at the time, I wasn't focused on understanding what God placed me down here to do for him. Truthfully, all I cared about is what he was going to do for me. Stuck in this vicious cycle of spiritual immaturity. And so God knew that the only way he could truly get through to me is by destroying and breaking up our relationship and causing me to question the only thing that ever mattered most to me. My baby girl gonna have to tell her own story. But with the childhood issues that she has been through, I can see how the devil always finds a way to come in between us too. But God taught me, don't ever try to blame her, even though she does some things wrong. Just keep looking at me. But when we got to that place where my own insecurities and lack of integrity made me abandon her emotionally, I was too busy focusing on her rather than blaming me. Paul already told us that marriage was going to come with problems. Two people focusing on trying to please each other takes time away from focusing on God. I let my love for her take the place of God. Now I'm not even pleasing to her, and she not pleasing me. She won't even have sex with me. I'm mad at her, talking to God like, Lord, this ain't how marriage is supposed to be. And I guess since I don't want to cheat, I end up a married man once again, turning back to pornography. I had overcome it and let it go because me and her were interacting and responding to one another so passionately. Now I send her a text and she barely want to respond to me. Young man, only 26 years old, so I'm so close to reach my physical peak. Been working out like 4 or 5 times a week, fully clothed and everybody notices how I've been priming my physique. Never try to draw attention to it, but when I get home I walk around with my shirt off purposely, hoping for the compliment I've been waiting for. I've been keeping myself together, but it feels like she hardly even looks at me. Lord, it's hard. Why she hardly ever even looks at me? And the silence is becoming deafening. We try to talk, but neither of us is listening. So long-fought conversations turn into overly short sentences. And through my own selfishness, I'm working on my own body, talking about the Bible said you ain't supposed to withhold your body from me. We're so far removed that she starts to remove herself because she says that I don't move her emotionally. And since my own tactics don't work, now I guess I'm trying to use God to get her for me. But he said that even though she was wrong, he was the one doing this to me. He put that mountain there purposely, and he wasn't going to move it for me because I needed to learn to really climb into her heart instead of just thinking about always going deep. My arrogance like, Chris, you don't have to take this. The Holy Spirit trying to rid the stupidity out of me, but I don't want to let it go. I'm holding on to it selfishly. And it still amazes me how God can take someone's wrong in a situation and use it to make things right inside of me. He said it was all for my own good because all throughout my life, I had allowed sex to become a need. Some men ain't gonna wanna hear this, but he said that men don't need sex. That's how Paul went unmarried and just lived his entire life serving God passionately. Yes, he made us and gave us our desires. Paul even said, get married if you can't train yourself to constrain your desires. And so what God was teaching me is that even though I'm married, if I'm going to live out his purpose, I still can't allow my passions to push me to behave uncontrollably. Because even though in our society, this isn't considered to cheat, God said that if you look upon a woman with lust, then that sin was still right there on the inside of me. He told me that I needed to learn how to get more in control of me. I can't stop because I'm watching her, telling him she the one who doing this to me. And plus the world told me to love myself. Look at where it got me. So in love with myself, now I'm touching on my own body. Okay, so I know this situation is touchy, but I only touch myself because she won't touch me. I feel lonely. She the one making me act out explicitly. But how I'm gonna expect God to grow me if he don't test me? I was praying to be more patient, self-controlled, and disciplined, but myself wouldn't let me. But how can we become more patient if we ain't willing to be a patient? How can we be more self-controlled if we don't even know how to control our very own hormones? Lord, I need you to please bring me to my knees and test these testes. Because how can a man become more disciplined if he never suffers being dissed? I'm like, Lord, look at this. She doing this. He like, Chris, she ain't right. But take a look in the mirror and remember who's really doing this. You want to be more disciplined? Then this the plan. Learn how to control one of your biggest weaknesses. Just because you're a married man, you will never truly be a godly man until you can stop blaming all of them. So now the story is coming full circle because I haven't watched pornography in over 10 years. And the irony is that the last time I watched, I clicked on one. The girl may have been just underdeveloped, but in my eyes, she looked more like a kid to me. She may not have been 3, like me, maybe more like an adolescent teen. But I broke down crying thinking about my nieces and nephew and how the devil is attacking all of the children coming up behind me. I hypocritically, immediately hurried up and cut off the TV. Told myself at least I wasn't no perverted molester. I remember that was one of the first thoughts that even came to me. And that's just like us, to look for somebody who we believe did something worser, because then I don't have to feel so bad about me. But long story short, that's how God finally set me free. I learned to spend more time in my prayer closet than trying to hide dark secrets in the closet where the devil kept me trapped, unable to speak God's word boldly and freely. So now when y'all hear this poetry, please make sure y'all go and look at yourselves, because I know it's easy just sitting here listening, looking at me. We all watch each other. It's innate, unconscious response to trying to figure out who we are supposed to be. None of us have this life all figured out, but this time I'm showing you something that you really need to see. You see, I used to be a pitiful person pretending to be a practicing Christian, watching pornography, while God was watching me. Now I'm watching the world around me, and I've grown to have this heart to want to see people set free from our own inhumane humanity. We say we human, but only animals live chasing their own desires uncontrollably. You too wild, trying to sow them wild oats. You gotta stop chasing your own pleasure and whatever makes you happy, and you gotta start focusing on what pleases God, because falling in love with him changes your trajectory. I'm watching me grow up right in front of me. This ain't no longer about growing my privates. This is about sitting with God growing in private. I ain't just trying to air out our marital privates, but I am God's private. And he said that no longer does he just want me to keep this to conversations that are held privately. I've spoken to so many people in private about this part of my walk, but now God said it's time for me to take this message and spread it globally. And so this little soldier is only standing at attention to bring attention to the very things that a lot of us are out here going through in private. We fighting the war and struggling in secret. I even talked to some professing Christians who believe that pornography is something that God is okay with. So married men watching porn because that girl on the screen who has no limits, just like me, makes him feel wanted. I've talked to young men who, just like me, want to do right, but they have a problem, and they believe marriage is going to fix it. But to be honest with you, it's just going to hide it. You can't cover it. You got to let God uncover it. Marriage was never meant to make sex unlimited. Everything has its limits. And when everything is flourishing, you cherish it. But when it's not, don't try to embellish it. Live out your truth and just let God come in and better it. Because he's watching you. And he promised that if I lived for him, that instead of living to please myself, he was going to teach me to learn how to take some of my darkest, most broken moments and give them to you to use. So I'm just trying to walk in his promise. And I hope you watching me. Follow me as I follow Christ. I didn't mean to get too graphic, but this message is truly autobiographical. I know somebody's watching me. So instead of dwelling on all of the things that I used to look at, all of the things that I've seen, I'm just trying to take one step closer to everything that God is calling me to do. So if you're watching this, then please just know that I'm just looking out for you. God is watching over us. You don't have to be who you used to. Don't let Satan use you. God bless, and I love you from here to heaven.